Hi, my name is Devin Boss, and I'm going to be teaching you about peach trees today.
In this presentation, I'm going to talk about our recommendations for successfully planting a peach tree in Austin, Texas. There are 5 critical steps to obtaining success with your peach tree. We will talk about selecting the right tree, selecting the right site to plant, preparing your soil correctly, pruning properly, and obtaining adequate pest control. There are 2 critical factors to consider when selecting your peach tree. The first is the varietal, the second is the rootstock. When selecting your varietal, you should consult with university recommendations based upon the features that you desire in your peach tree. Important features to consider include the characteristics of the fruit, winter hardiness, susceptibility to disease, and drought sensitivity. When selecting a tree based on its rootstock, it is important to consider the characteristics of the rootstock in question. Many rootstocks are more tolerant of cold temperatures and parasitic nematodes.
This is an example of a hybrid rootstock. We can see that the base was grafted on to a peach tree. The peach tree then grows up, but the rootstock was from a different tree. These types of rootstocks are typically marked. In this case, this is a Lovell peach rootstock. When selecting a tree, it's important to consider the way that the tree has been shaped by the nursery. In this particular case, the scaffold branch is much too sharp. Scaffold branches should come out between 30 and 45 degree angles. That will ensure that they have adequate strength to bear the weight of fruit as it grows on the peach tree. In this particular case, this is a problem because this particular scaffold branch could easily break and split the tree right in half if enough weight was placed upon it.
In the Austin, Texas region, we recommend the varietals July Alberta, Gold Dust, Sam Houston, and Redskin. We also recommend choosing a rootstock that is tolerant to cold temperatures. When selecting your site, peach trees require at least 8 hours of full sun. It's also important to ensure that peach trees are adequately spaced apart and away from other vegetation.
Peach trees need to be appropriately spaced from other trees. Unfortunately, this aspen tree is kind of in the way. That means that this tree right here is going to compete for nutrients. This is somewhat of a problem. However, this aspen tree's health is not in good shape. Because it will likely die, we're not particularly concerned about this case.
Trees should be placed at least 10 feet away from each other, preferably 12 to 16 feet apart. It's also crucial to eliminate any broadleaf weeds or other plants, such as grass, from the area surrounding the peach tree.
Weeds, especially broadleaf weeds around the base of the peach tree, are a hazard. They must be eliminated because they can harbor dangerous nematodes, parasitic nematodes that can spread viruses.
It is also very important to call 811 or visit texas811.org at least 2 days prior to digging to schedule a free marking of utility lines. State laws require that you call before you dig. This free service will allow utility lines to be marked on your property.
There's an electrical box right on the other side of this fence that might not have even been noticed. You can obtain a free assessment with markings for where buried lines exist on your property. State laws typically require that you call before you dig. It's also a wise thing to do. You certainly don't want to strike a power line and cause a fire. Sometimes when you're digging, you still need to be careful because not every underground line can be marked. In this case, this was a water drain line that was certainly not marked by blue stakes. However, we can see that it provides the drainage for this house. Fortunately, it was not struck with machinery, but just with a shovel that didn't cause much damage.
It is important to assess the soil composition because most soils are less than ideal. Peach trees prefer a sandy loam soil with a pH of around 6.5. In the clay pan area of Austin, Texas, though upland soils do have a sandy loam surface, They cover a dense claypan subsoil that can be a problem for young peach tree roots. Peach trees prefer at least 3 to 4 feet of sandy loam soil. Depending on your soil composition, you will likely require some excavation. Pruning is a critical subject because improper pruning is irreparable. Once you remove a branch, you can't get it back. The objectives are to create a scaffolding branch system with an open vase pattern.
In this particular example, the scaffold branches are appropriate. You can see that they're fairly well balanced. We have, in this case, two fairly strong scaffold branches with reasonably equal spacing with these opposing scaffold branches coming off at good angles. In this case, these two scaffold branches are coming off around really good. Let's say this is about 45. This one might be a little bit sharp, but if we train it appropriately, we'll get a much better angle. You can see that I left this node here. This node will allow us to grow off possibly an even better angle, and then we can prune this particular branch. However, I'm keeping this branch for now, so we have appropriate balance in the tree. It's also important to not have overlapping branches. In this particular case, I'm remembering now, the reason that I left this node is because we want to make sure that we can have some adequate branching to give this fruit the leaves and the nourishment that it needs. However, we likely will remove this scaffold branch in preference for this one down below because we don't want to have competing branches or branches competing for sunlight. Now fortunately, these are spaced apart a little bit, so for now it won't be a problem, but at some point it will become a problem and we'll want to select this branch assuming that it's stronger. However, you also don't want to be too aggressive in removing possible scaffold branches, because if you're too aggressive, you could end up with a problem where if for some reason you end up with disease or some injury that eliminates this scaffold branch from being a viable branch, you will lose it. And if you don't have a backup option, then you are out of luck. This is another example of branches that are competing. But again, we'll keep these for now to ensure that we can properly select the right one when removing one of the branches that's competing. We'll probably end up removing this branch. When pruning, it's important to be very careful in which branches and nodes you select. A single node can become a vital link that will allow a huge scaffold branch to potentially grow. In this case, this particular node was selected because of its angle. We notice that there are also other options. However, in this case, this node is on the top of this branch. Even though this branch is fairly vertical, we can still see what would happen is this branch would grow into the tree, and that's a problem. We don't want any kind of crossover branches like that, so this node will need to be removed. This other node over here is also suspect. We will probably need to remove that because it may compete with this branch unless it decides to curve outward.
You want to remove dead, dying, and diseased branches, and remove clustered, crossing, or branches that have very sharp or acute angles. Scaffolding branches are branches that are designed to support the weight of the fruit and provide the structure that is ideal for a fruit-bearing peach tree. Early creation of this branch structure is critical to long-term development. It is also much easier to shape the tree in its early years than to need to make large corrections later in the tree's life. Scaffolding branches should begin around 18 to 36 inches on the trunk and grow outward from the trunk center at a 45-degree angle. Angles between 30 and 45 degrees are acceptable. Each tree should have around 4 to 5 scaffolding branches to prevent overcrowding. For pest control, imidacloprid, a neonicotinoid, is a popular pesticide that is particularly effective at protecting the peach trees from borers because of the pesticide's systemic nature. Peach trees can be protected from anywhere between 1 to 7 years after treatment with imidacloprid. It's also the most popular commercial pesticide worldwide. Peaches are also particularly susceptible to peach leaf curl, which is a fungus. Peach leaf curl can be prevented with probuconazole. However, active infections require copper sprays. Be sure to only use pesticides and fungicides that are properly labeled for fruit-bearing peach trees, and always follow directions on the label. To keep peach trees healthy, it is also important to provide proper irrigation. Overwatering is a common source of root rot, which can be fatal to a peach tree. The damages caused by overwatering are more prevalent with base soils with dense clay or silt compositions. On average, mature peach trees require at least 36 inches of water per year. Drip irrigation systems tend to be the most effective form of delivery. In summary, we talked about best practices for tree selection, site selection, soil preparation, pruning, and pest control, as well as irrigation for the Austin, Texas area. Other regions may have value from following our recommendations as well. However, adaptations may be required to suit your individual situations.